Gogebic mine, forget about it. But right to work, alive and well. Joint Finance begins hearings on the budget. It's a great day for Capitol Roundtable. I want to thank Shawn Johnson of Wisconsin Public Radio, Mary Spicuzza, formerly of the State Journal, but soon to be with the Milwaukee Journal Sentinal, and Jason Stein, Capitol reporter for the Journal Sentinel. Thank you. Big news on Gogebic, but let me ask you this. Shouldn't we have seen this coming? Because if you carefully watch the lobbying registrations, you'll see that on February 16th, Gogebic's lobbyists, Tom Fonfara and Bob Seitz, dropped. Gone. But this just fascinates me. Remember, in the 11-12 session, Dale Schultz blocked the mine bill. Then Senator Gogebic was elected, so he was the 17th vote. Then we learned from the John Doe records, $700,000 donation by Gogebic to the governor's recall campaign. That was the first bill passed in the 13-14 session. Controversies with Ashland and Iron counties. The Bad River tribe says you'll pollute. Test borings. Did any of you ever think this mine would really open?
Thought maybe a small mine would open. Yeah. I don't know. And don't forget, in your list of stuff there, you had armed guards at the mine.
Thank you.
You have neighbors who won't talk to neighbors up in Iron and Ashland County over this issue.
Thank you.
I mean, it was probably second only to Act 10 and contentious issues that I've covered there. And poof, done. I think you got to also factor in iron ore prices as to why this thing is not happening. They were a lot higher when it was being debated.
One question I want to ask Bill Williams, the Gogebic president, or wherever his title is. Did geology or politics kill it? What do you think?
Or the commodities market.
Thank you. As Shawn just alluded to.
I always thought the chances of it passing were, of it going forward, were small. Small. I mean, there was always a chance, and there's still a chance, I think.
Jason, why do you say that? Because of the science? Because of the politics?
Well, because of lots of things. Because of the science, because of the commodities market, because of the the federal government, because of the tribe. The fact that the tribe that's in the area that's proposed mine has been designated by the federal government to have some environmental oversight. I mean, many were the roadblocks in front of that thing. But it was interesting to me that when do we find out about it? We find out about it after the election.
Yeah. Mary, your thoughts?
It seemed like, Governor Walker and state lawmakers did everything they could to have that mine open. But there are these things like federal laws and the EPA, and unless we have a President Walker who takes that on at some point in the future, I think that the obstacles on a federal level and with lawsuits that were going to come down, combined with the prices, it's like it lowers the incentive to keep the battle going if you're not going to get much money for the product. But it's interesting because when I called Senators Schultz and Jauch on Friday, late Friday when the news broke. Neither of them sounded surprised. I mean, they actually, Senator Jauch said 4 words, "We told you so."
Oh, really?
Yes. So, and Senator Schultz said effectively the same thing.
But
so it was something. I mean, they had pretty much been saying this isn't going to happen from the beginning.
But that is one hard-scrabble area up there. I mean, we've been to the mine site several times. There are some real hopes that it would bring jobs and some economic anchors to that community. And that hope has just been dashed. So, apart from the rhetoric, in the Capitol, there's some real economic sense of loss for the future there. You were going to say, Shawn, did you have a PS on that?
I guess I wouldn't be surprised if history sort of repeats itself on this, that ore is going to be there. Prices will go, they'll get high again at some point in the future, but you're going to have the same obstacles will be there too. I mean, there are a lot of wetlands up there. We don't know. I mean, they blamed the EPA. We don't know if they could have done it in a cost-effective way, gotten it permitted at the state level. They didn't finish that process, so who knows when history will repeat itself, but the ore ain't going anywhere.
But it's really tough to get out, and they found a lot more wetlands than they anticipated. Okay, Right to Life. You wrote a book about Act 10, Jason. Did last week's debate on Right to Life strike you as a...
Right to work?
Right to work, excuse me. My mistake. Right to work. did it strike you as a rerun?
Because sometimes they talk about it like it's a matter of life and death.
Jason, thanks very much.
I mean, there were echoes of that earlier 2011 labor fight last week. Absolutely, there'll be echoes this week as the process is finished. I mean, clearly nothing to the degree. I mean, Act 10 was an order of magnitude bigger than what we saw last week. But you know, absolutely. I mean, it was like flashbacks for everyone, I think, last week.
We all lived through that. So your memories, I mean, the Act 10 controversy, 100,000 people, and then when only like 2,000 or 3,000 or 4,000 show up. So maybe our expectations for a rerun of Act 10 were too high, but your memories of last week, any comparison to Act 10?
I mean, if you could wipe those memories of Act 10 away, go back to stories you used to cover before Act 10, right? And you saw 2,000 to 3,000 people at the Capitol, you'd say, oh my goodness,
yes,
this is huge. But it's only natural to compare it against Act 10, and it doesn't compare. And even people who are there are saying, we don't think we can stop it. And I think that's the critical difference between this and Act 10. Back in Act 10, there were a lot of people there who felt, yeah, absolutely, if we're here every day, Democrats stay out of the state, we're going to stop this thing. And those elements just aren't there this time.
Mary, your memories of it?
Yeah, I think I have a distinct memory of covering Act 10, and it was so loud that like there was just drumming in your ears all the time. You couldn't see marble when you looked out on the rotunda because there were so many bodies. And I remember at one point the crowd did part because firefighters marched through with their bagpipes, and Dick Wheeler, our legend, yes, turned to me and said, effectively, you're not covering news anymore, you're covering history now.
Yes.
So not direct quote, but essentially. And it was like, it really felt like we would never see anything like that again in our lifetime, and I'd never seen anything like that. And last week was kind of, brought up some memories, but it didn't have that feeling where you could really feel the crowd noise in your body like you could during that.
Why did Senate Majority Leader Fitzgerald put the pedal to the metal so hard on this so early? And here's the context. Here's why I'm asking. When I interviewed candidates for the November election, I didn't ask about right to work, and I didn't think it was a priority. And then when Scott Walker was elected in 2010, he didn't mention Act 10 and the scope of those changes. So why did Fitz put the pedal to the metal? Jason, your theory?
It's a lot of things. He's got a much more conservative caucus now in the Senate. He knew that opponents of right to work would be airing ads that would make his job a little bit harder. He knew that he had the votes at that moment. He knew that his caucus had become so conservative that he could not stop a debate. He could not stop a parade on right to work in the Senate. So he just decided he got to the head of the parade and led it. And and then again finally. I think it goes back to and he said this before, he had the votes for something that he knew he was going to have to eventually pass, so he decided to go ahead and pass it rather than waiting to get closer to the election, give people a chance to forget it if they're going to forget it.
Mary and Shawn, what about the evolution of Walker on this issue? He said, not a priority, keep it from my desk. And now he's bring it on, yay. I mean, he's campaigning for president based on how he's going to sign it this week. What about his, I don't want to say flip-flop, but evolution on the issue, Mary?
It's interesting because, he said it would be a distraction, that that wasn't what he was focused on. And it's interesting because he never said he would veto it. He never vowed to veto it. So that kind of raised some questions. He sponsored it. He's always said that as a policy, he supports it and has supported it since he first, in general, but he made it sound like it wasn't going to come to his desk this session. And then it was kind of sounded like he was maybe saying, well, I'll get the budget taken care of first, and then, we'll see what happens. And it was interesting because his office is saying, well, he hasn't flip-flopped because he's always supported it as a policy, and he's already introduced his budget, so now is an appropriate time, which definitely does not seem, it's not necessarily a flip-flop on policy a position, but it is a clear shift, evolution, if you will, of when it was going to come up.
Does it help him on the presidential trail?
I think it
John?
does.
Mary thinks so?
I think it helps him in the primary. Maybe, I don't know if it's a factor in the general should he get there. But yeah, I mean, big donors are going to like that. He can add it to that list that he's already been reading off at the rallies. But, you know, in a general election, he didn't want to talk about it. I think it's fair to say he misled on what was going to happen this
the other thing, too, that's worth remembering is that the governor has always campaigned, including now running for president, as someone who, look, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do, and then I'm going to do it. And, you know, there's a lot of truth to that for many of his policies, except when there's not. And when there's not, now there are many things that he's done, including Act 10, his signature accomplishment on labor, right to work, and a number of things that are in the budget this time that in no way, shape, or form did he campaign on. So, you know, that develops a little counter-narrative to his own political life story that he will be presenting everywhere he goes in this country for, you know, the next year.
Well, that nice transition to the budget. They briefed us on the budget for about an hour and a half on February 3rd. They gave us an overview and a budget in brief.
Right.
But Bob Lang of the Fiscal Bureau last week released the 559 Bible on the budget. And there's a lot of things in it that weren't announced on February 3. So let's recount some of those that you think are the most meaningful. Shawn, you want to go first?
I'd name one that wasn't in the book, but was in a memo that was requested by Democratic legislators, and that showed that the Walker administration could have paid off this, $108 million in bonding. Instead, decided to defer that.
Kick it down the can,
right.
down the road.
And you know, you can make all sorts of good reasons about why that's a smart move. Okay, it's a lot easier to do that than it is to cut $108 million out of the budget, right?
Right.
But you know, that is absolutely, you know, credit card spending, because it's you're going to have to pay that off in future budgets instead of paying for using $20 million on something else in the next budget. You're going to spend $20 million paying off
interest.
This, well, it would be the principal, and then
with some additional
$1.1 million in the next biennium in interest, which is small in context of the overall budget. But we wondered what was going to happen if we were going to have a budget repair bill, or what was going to happen with this budget, because every sign showed it to be in shortfall. This is what's happening.
Well, and that's part of the way that you solve the $283 million deficit that looms on June 30, is you kick $108 million payment, which was scheduled to be made by June 30, into the next fiscal year.
Sure.
Mary, you're...
Yeah, I think Jason did a good job of reporting on the scoop and toss, because we had actually been told...
There it is. There's the phrase.
There's the phrase.
We had been told, I think when the former Secretary of DOA had spoken to us just a few days before the scoop and toss was reported, it sounded like that wasn't going to happen, that it was just going to be interest and refinancing, that principal, this wasn't going to happen. So that was interesting. I think, as we talked about last time, the Wisconsin Public TV, Wisconsin Public Radio.
That's a cut of $4.2 million, yep.
That's and then senior care, which I think Jason was going to talk about too.
Yeah. Jason, do you want to take senior care?
Sure. I mean, there's a couple of programs for the elderly that are getting affected in this budget. One is senior care, which is Wisconsin's unique in the nation alternative to Medicare Part D. Can be in many cases cheaper for people than Medicare Part D. That program would take a major blow under Walker's proposed budget. I'm just going to throw out my guess on that. I think what you're going to see happen is Republican lawmakers step in and protect that program from major changes, but probably put in place some kind of higher annual fee on the program. Right now it's $30 a year, I think. Yeah. It's been that way for a number of years. I think you'll see them increase that. The other big program that's seeing a change is family care, also for elderly people and the disabled. Right now there could be some major changes in that could affect consumers in terms of the care workers that come into their home, even in some cases in terms of who their primary care physician is. So that's another proposal to watch, because that again would affect tens of thousands of people who in many cases vote.
Well, but you also wrote the story, page 1 of the Journal Sentinel, potentially 150,000 people now on Badger Care would have to pay, is it co-pays for the first time or higher co-pays if the feds issue a waiver?
Right. So there's two parts of that. This is all Medicaid all the time here, I guess we're talking about. But there's two things to that. One, people below the poverty line, single adults, childless adults, would have to pay a premium for the first time.
First time.
Correct. And they might have to, if they engage in certain risk behaviors, which we haven't been told what they are, but you've got to assume it's, smoking, being obese, that sort of thing. I mean, that's what they always are. They might have to pay an additional premium on top of that. So what we'll have to wait and see is, does President Barack Obama's administration gets to decide whether or not this happens? We'll see what they do.
Yeah, and they also didn't tell us that they were going to stop buying stewardship land until 2018. That was interesting.
Yes.
GPR funding for state parks.
GPR funding. The state parks are going to have to make it on
fees.
Right.
That was not something you heard on the campaign trail. No.
No. And also, I found this intriguing in Bob Lang's summary. In the Department of Tourism, they would create an 8-employee office of marketing to provide marketing services to all state agencies. With losing about 16 jobs, excuse me, in other state agencies. I find that intriguing. Any other PSs on stuff that wasn't announced on February 3rd? I am going to be okay.
All right.
Anything else?
We can't lose you in the middle of the budget process.
No.
You got to hang with us for a couple more months.
I understand. Okay, new subject. How is presidential candidate Walker different from Governor Walker?
Oh, great question.
Yeah. It's interesting because I feel like all of the things that we heard Governor Walker downplay on the campaign trail for the governor's race in 2014, he didn't think his position on gay marriage was important.
Yes.
He didn't want to talk about social issues. He talked very little about defunding Planned Parenthood or abortion restrictions. Right to work wasn't a priority. Now, when you hear him talk to a conservative audience, like at CPAC recently, he talked about defunding Planned Parenthood, restricting abortion. Now he was going to sign right to work. It's
as badges of honor,
right?
Appealing
As,
to the conservative
his
base.
accomplishments,
Yes.
versus holding it at an arm's distance. So I think that's been a clear distinction for me.
It's kind of like if you had like a grilled steak salad. It's the same salad with steak on top of it, and it's just in one context. The governor is saying, "Hey, look at this salad. This is very healthy. This is very excellent salad, good for your heart." And then in another context, he's saying, look at the red meat on this salad. Look at the grilled meat on this salad. It's same salad, kind of same statements. It's just there's something, one thing is getting highlighted here, another thing's getting highlighted here.
John,
Are you saying he's not eating ham sandwiches in a brown bag anymore?
Well, there's still ham sandwiches. No, I don't want to say that. That's dessert. The ham sandwich is for dessert.
Ham cheese, yeah.
And if you notice, he's Facebooking what? He goes to Culver's and sends pictures of that, and the Washington Post accused him of having what? The most boring Twitter account?
Right. And to be fair, they called it brilliantly boring. But yes,
Brilliantly
they called
boring.
it brilliantly right,
Okay.
but boring nonetheless, yeah.
Shawn, your impressions on presidential candidate versus governor?
Well, I don't know how to follow up the salad example that Jason gave, which was excellent. But I just remember the campaign and ask him about these issues and ask him again and again and just downplayed it and made it seem like the media is the only ones that care about that, right?
Yeah.
Now, whoa, look at him. He wants to talk about it everywhere. So it's just a change of circumstances, and he's very happy to talk about his record in these circumstances.
When he accuses the media of focusing on things that are not of interest to Americans who want better jobs and better college education for their kids, does that resonate?
Oh, sure. No, I think it does. With a certain segment of people,
Right.
and people who have a tendency to vote in the Republican primary for president that he's actively engaged in, sure. And the caveat to that would be, though, as Shawn said, I can remember when the governor was on our editorial board and he was getting questions about where he stood on abortion, and he was saying, hey, come on, this isn't, people care about jobs, this is not the thing that matters. But now, strangely, it seems to matter. So I think you do have to be careful when you have a politician saying, hey, this doesn't matter, nobody should be asking me about this.
John?
I think there is an outside chance that ultimately hurts him in a primary, though, because he could have a primary opponent say, which Scott Walker are we going to get here, okay? In the cases of Act 10 and a right to work, yeah, he kind of misled people, although in those situations the Republicans feel like the right side ultimately won, so I don't know if those would be the examples that came up. But on something like immigration, a few years ago, he's interested in the idea of amnesty.
Yep.
Now that is a political non-starter for a Republican primary,
right.
He opposes it, and I mean it's just basically a flip.
Yeah. And he even said that.
And he did, yeah. He ripped the
it.
Band-Aid off on Sunday and said, yeah, I changed my mind. I think there is an opening there for a Republican to say, which Scott Walker are you going to get here? Right now, though, he's riding high.
Okay. I want to touch on
one. He did a fundraising letter on, he was getting a lot of questions and kind of getting some negative media, and he actually turned that around to his advantage to talk about the clueless and mindless journalistic herd.
Right. 1 month after the governor recommended the $300 million cut over 2 years for the UW, in exchange for giving them the new governing structure and being able to make their own decisions. What's your assessment of where that plan is in the ledge 1 month later? Gain traction?
Well, it hasn't been killed. It hasn't been killed. I think that there's a very good chance that something giving the university more flexibility under state rules and state law, I think there's a very good chance that something like that passes. I think there's an excellent to 100% chance that the cuts to the university pass, and that something, that they get some kind of a bone.
Pass at $300 million, Jason? Because Voss has said if there's any new money...
that would be the caveat.
Okay,
the caveat would be is if in May the legislature's budget office tells us, hey, we found some new money. Okay. But if there's no new money, yeah, they get cut at that level. So then the question just becomes, what flexibilities don't they get? Clearly, they're not going to get the power from this legislature to raise tuition at whatever level they want. That's not going to happen.
There'll be some type of a cap on that.
Oh, yeah.
Which probably helps Walker's proposals gain traction in the ledge, correct?
I think so.
Mary, your thought?
I think that they're all waiting on those numbers to come out and see how much more they could help the university by, well, I shouldn't say help, but cut them by less, I guess. So we'll see. I wouldn't be surprised if they were able to find some money. It sounds like they're all willing to do that. I don't think it's going to be what the university wants, but I don't think it'll necessarily be $300 million. Okay.
We're starting joint finance hearing with agency heads here in a few hours. Anything to look for? Certainly when DHS comes up, Jason, Kitty Rose is going to have to do some splaining on those changes, right?
On the health services changes, sure. I mean, again, because something like senior care that is exclusively made up of people who vote, that one I'm betting that changes happen there. But yeah, I mean, we'll have a lot of things happening on the budget this week, and at the same time we'll have these right to work action and protest. So it's going to be a very busy week.
It's going to be a very busy week. Any PSs on what to look for with joint finance before we wrap it up? No? John?
It's just always a good opportunity you've got, in this case, a bunch of Republicans in the room. They have a chance to kind of tee off on their concerns, and if you watch enough of these briefings, you can kind of get a sense of where they're going to go, broad strokes in the budget.
I'll be looking at transportation. That's all that bonding. Mary, we want to say goodbye to you in a special way.
Whoa.
Well, just 3 roses. We wish you good well.
Thank
good
you.
wishes, and we want to 6 years in the Capitol.
Yeah.
And I maintain they've been 6 of the most historical years.
I would
The
say
transition
so.
from Doyle to Walker to Act 10.
You know how to pick them.
I know.
You do know how to pick
You
them.
know.
So,
And then they wanted to send me off with a bang with right to work, apparently.
Yes.
So, but I'll still be around. You'll probably
know.
see me in the press room sometime.
We hope
we
so.
hope
Yeah.
so, because it's been a joy to have you up there in the trenches with us.
Thank you.
You
That's so
got
sweet.
married, started a family, just roses. They may not
Yeah,
have
some
liked the
personal
show in
history.
the morning, but
That's awesome. Thank you. Yeah, it's been an exciting time. We were at the Capitol on Saturday packing up my desk, and my husband had our daughter with him, so I could clean up. And it was funny because he pulled into the Capitol, and I said, "Is that a good idea?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, it's fine." And then of course the protests, the rally ended, and the marchers started marching around the Capitol. So we sat there for about 15 minutes waiting to get through. And I feel like my daughter, that was kind of the first protest that she witnessed. So she seemed to be, but she definitely heard singing enough when I was pregnant, so it probably was very familiar to her.
well, good luck at the Journal Sentinel. You're going to do great.
Thank you.
Shawn, Mary, Jason, thanks very much. That's Cap Roundtable. Thank you.
Thanks.